Let's get the latest now from Jerusalem and correspondent Irris Makler. Irris, we're hearing of sirens in Tel Aviv, warning of possibly incoming rockets. There's been no ground offensive this Saturday after the expiration of that deadline. Both sides on tenterhooks.
Yes, that's right. And it's interesting throughout this whole period, and despite the talk of a catastrophe, which I believe there is in the Gaza Strip, nevertheless, the rocket fire from Hamas continues into Israel. So some parts of the society are able to function, and that is the militants. But what we have heard today from Israel's military spokesperson in his address within the past hour is that Israel is preparing for a broad ground offensive, as he put it. The military is now ready. It's waiting for a green light from the politicians. It's ready to go. And he said there may be some few things that are holding that up. And I took that, my interpretation of that was that he meant the evacuation of civilians in Gaza. It's understood that about 500,000 have now left the north of the Gaza Strip. That's what we have heard from the United Nations. Israel has asked for over 1 million people to leave in order for them to be safe and not to be part of that ground offensive. So I guess what I interpreted him to be saying is he's waiting for that.
Waiting for that in the last minutes, the French news agency AFP, quoting the Israeli military, is saying that some bodies of hostages that were taken last Saturday have been found in Gaza. It's been a week since Hamas launched that shock operation. Hamas, which claims that 22 of the hostages have been killed. There's no confirmation of that. Over in Tel Aviv, a rally of families of the dozens abducted, many directing their ire at the intelligence failures and the government of Benjamin Netanyahu.
Please, we beg you, cry to your leaders to pressure the Hamas to send the children and the families home. There's nothing else that you could do right now. Once they're here, we can settle all the differences, but
זו סיטואציה שאנחנו לא מכירים אותה בארץ. זו השואה השנייה שלנו. ועכשיו אני אגע בנקודה הזאת, שכל מה שהביא אותנו למקום הזה, החמאס הם נוראים, הם חיות טורפות. אבל הכיבוש, 57 שנה, הביא אותנו למקום הזה גם.
The distress there of those families. And again, the fate of those hostages is high on the minds where you are.
Very high. And you know, you gave a figure of 22 hostages that may have died. On day 2, Hamas said it was 4 hostages. Then they said 13. Today I've heard 9. So every 2 or 3 days, there's another announcement of hostages who've been killed in Israeli airstrikes. And, you know, it's impossible to corroborate. It could be true, but it's impossible to corroborate. And I think what it's a sign of is how important for Hamas, how important it is for Hamas to keep this issue in the public eye. They know how emotional it is in Israel. They know its leverage. And I guess both sides know its leverage, really, because what I think from what I've heard Israeli officials saying, they have initiated this siege of the Gaza Strip, and they will then say, if you want a deal, you know, if you want us to take humanitarian measures in your favor, say Israeli officials, then you will do a humanitarian gesture towards us and release the women and the children. So everybody is aware of these poor people being held hostage, and it's a psychological warfare and it's a real warfare with their lives.
In the last minutes, there's the growing concern over what's happening at Israel's northern border. Hezbollah saying at least one of its fighters has been killed in strikes on Lebanon. Hezbollah, which claims to earlier have hit Israeli positions in the disputed Sheba Farms area. 2 Lebanese civilians killed. Hezbollah closely aligned with Iran, whose foreign minister was in Beirut on Friday and who's been speaking.
I have realized that, according to the scenario set by Hezbollah, any step the resistance will take will result in a huge earthquake against the Zionist entity. If the international community, the United Nations, and actors in the world and region who support the Zionist entity's wars are reluctant, they will receive a suitable response in the place that the resistance deems appropriate.
We're with Irris Makler in Jerusalem. How high is the concern regarding Israel's northern border right now?
The concern is definitely high, and in Israel, they, I think, have stopped seeing this as something just between Israel and Hamas. The scale of the operation a week ago today, its success, I think perhaps its unexpected success for Hamas, the involvement with more and more evidence coming out about the involvement in terms of training, both with ISIS fighters in the Sinai Desert and with Lebanese fighters, a game plan set by Iran and Hezbollah. The feeling is that this is a wider conflict. So there will be a coordination for Israeli or anticipate Israeli officials, because it's not just Hamas that's involved in this. It is also Hezbollah. At the moment, it's a small scale, a dance, one Israeli analyst has said. It's a dance at the moment. You know, each side has much greater capacity. What we're seeing is drones or mortars, and we know that what Hezbollah has in Lebanon is long-range targeted missiles. We're not seeing any of those used yet. That doesn't mean we won't, and I think Israel is anticipating that because of the involvement of Hezbollah, and because of the involvement of Iran, which is increasingly becoming clear.
Yeah, and you mentioned at the outset Israel getting all its ducks in order before any ground invasion in Gaza. As time passes, there's also global public opinion to contend with. We've heard several statements, the latest coming out of Paris in the last minutes, asking both Israel and Egypt to open a humanitarian corridor for Gaza via the Rafah border crossing. We also had similar statements coming earlier from Spain's prime minister, from Germany's foreign minister. In the latest leg of his tour of the region, the U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken in Saudi Arabia also commenting.
As Israel pursues its legitimate right to defending its people and to trying to assure that this never happens again, it is vitally important that all of us look out for civilians. None of us want to see suffering by civilians on any side, whether it's in Israel, whether it's in Gaza, whether it's anywhere else.
Irris Makler, there is that question over the longer Gaza stays sealed, what happens in terms of global sympathy for Israel after the targeting of those civilians a week ago?
Yes, I think there's lots of issues in play, and that is one of them, definitely, because the people who are paying the price, it seems, are the civilians in Gaza and the civilians in Israel. It doesn't seem that Hamas is yet paying a price from all the footage that I've seen, the statements that they've been making. They don't want people to move south. I want to say one thing about the movement of people. Israel says that the reason it wants the civilians out of the way is because they're planning a ground offensive. But for Palestinians, the taking of their possessions, not even all their possessions, what they can fit in their car or on a buggy or on their back, is so painful and so traumatic and so reminiscent of the original Nakba, as they call it, that just that action of moving south, even if they were to move back later, even if the anticipation is not that they will be there the whole time, it's supremely painful. The other thing, of course, is, what will they do in the south? How long will they be there? Would they be able to go leave the Gaza Strip and go into Egypt? Well, Egypt is very firmly saying no to that at the moment. They don't want to resettle 1 million Palestinians inside Egypt. So the civilians in Gaza are caught between hardline Egyptian position, a hardline Israeli position, and a hardline Hamas position.
Irris Makler reporting live from Jerusalem. Many thanks for that update.